that.
You have the OBS stuff going too?
Yeah.
Okay.
A few moments. You're right. Like right now.
As soon as we test the mic in, okay, get it out so you can put the link on there.
It's working. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead and do it. A few moments. You're right. Like right now. So behind.
Okay, ready?
Picking you up from there.
Wow.
It's really fun.
This is a test of courtesy of the floor. Hopefully it sounds good. Thank you. Bye.
You can also mute it whenever we're not. Sounds good.
All right, that's it.
Okay, and I want to test desktop audio. Make sure that's still coming through.
Okay, your audio is live too, so remember that.
Okay.
Got it.
Looks like we're on the internet.
Okay, we'll call the Monday, April 27th board meeting, regular board meeting of the Jersey School District to order. Could I have a roll call, Mr. Enders?
Mr. Becker,
Here.
Mr. Berngard,
Here.
Mrs. Diller, Mrs. Grant,
Who's
Mr.
Catherine?
Kinley,
Here.
Mr. Broski,
Here.
Mrs. Stemler,
Here.
Mrs. Thomas, Mrs. Thomas,
You need to unmute, Mary. There you go.
Here.
Mr. Allen.
Here. Okay, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America
and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and
Justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, next item is approval of minutes for March 9th and March 23rd. March 23rd was our first virtual meeting, and it looks like we'll be continuing to have these meetings virtually for the foreseeable future until the governor's order has been rescinded. Any question? Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved, Mary.
Thank you.
Second.
Any questions or corrections noted? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Enders, could you do a roll call, please?
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Berngard,
Yes.
Mrs. Ober,
Yes.
Mrs. Grant,
Yes.
Kinley,
Yes.
Yes.
Stemler,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Lino,
Thank you. Treasurer's report. We have the March 2020 Treasurer's report and the March 2020 investment report. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved, Mary.
Second.
Oh, that's out.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, or corrections?
I have a question for Ben on the investment report. Do you anticipate any early redemption of any of the CDs as far as cash flow problems at this point?
No, not at this point.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing no further questions, we'll do a roll call, please. Mr. Enders.
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Berngard,
Yes.
Mrs. Dobler,
Yes.
I've never seen
Mrs. Grant,
Yes.
McKinley,
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky,
Yes.
Mrs.
Yes.
Thomas,
Did you say Thomas? Because you're fading out, Ben, to me.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
9.
Okay, approval of bills in the total of $4,306,616.31. We have a motion, please.
So
Motion.
moved, Mary.
There's a second?
Second, Nancy.
Any questions or corrections? Okay, hearing none, we have a roll call.
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Berngard,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Grant,
I'm sorry, Ben, did you say Mrs. Grant?
yes, Mrs. Grant,
Yes.
McKinley,
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky,
Yes.
Stemler,
Mrs. Stemler, you're muted.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes,
9.
thank you. Communications, Dr. Dady.
We do have a couple things to let everyone know about. Everyone should have gotten one call stating that our food distribution days have changed from Monday and Wednesday to Monday and Thursdays. The times are the same. Another thing that's going on is we were approached by, I believe it's the county sheriff. Les?
I believe so.
Yeah, Mr. Lusk, and they've done some recycling locations. With a lot of the recycling locations shut down, they're actually doing one at the high school. We have their certificate of liability and everything in place for their facility use, and the recycling times for that are Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. You need to use the Schaefer Lane entrance, the back entrance into the high school, and they will have it manned the entire time. And then basically the bins and stuff go away each evening so that no one's coming at an unmanned time. So you must be there between 8 and 4 if you're going to do recycling in our area. Also, I need to notify everyone that we do have a bid opening, and due to the requirements of it being public, it will be done through this same type of setting. We will stream the bid opening. The bid opening is for the CTE wall retrofit project, and we will be streaming that on our district's channel here on Friday at noon. Also, there's a capital projects meeting on May 4th, and that will be streamed virtually as well, the same as we do our board meetings. I don't have the time written down of that, Mr. Enders. What time is the capital projects meeting?
6:30.
So 6:30. I'm hoping that's at night. Just kidding. 6:30 p.m. That'll be on May 4th on Monday. And also, I just wanted to, that is all I have for communications. Mr. Allen.
Dr. D,
Yes.
the reasoning that the distribution got switched to Thursday, they're now distributing food Saturdays and Sundays as well.
Yes, I know he broke up a little bit there, but the reason we went to Thursday instead of Wednesday is because the program allows us to feed the children through the weekend, which takes some of the burden off some of our local folks that we're trying to help out with that. And so Monday's distribution will cover Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday's distribution will cover Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
That's insane.
Okay, just one thing on that. I had received a phone call that the announcement that's in the Express apparently is incorrect. It only refers to breakfast or lunches being served, only one meal. So if you could check that out with whoever our contact is with the Express. Make sure they have the updated information, the new dates, and how many meals are going to be available.
Got it.
Thank you.
Got good reviews.
President's report. Just wanted to report that there were 3 executive sessions that have been held since the last meeting. There was one on Tuesday, the 21st, which was a Capital Reserve Committee, board members only executive session for legal and security and student safety. There was a meeting, another special committee on school choice that was held on the 22nd, and that was also legal and student safety because of the anticipated discussion of possible student information. And then it was executive session this evening at 6 o'clock for legal and security and contracting issues. I've tried to attend more of the PSBA functions. I attended a Zoom meeting last week that was on COVID related, kind of whatever anybody wanted to talk about, and it was performed under the auspices of PSBA. There was a lot of good information on it, and I took the opportunity to advocate for broadband in our area again, that should stay on the forefront of PSBA's agenda for their legislative affairs folks. There are 2 PSBA Zooms that I'll be attending this week. One is on Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock, and that's on digital equity and trauma-informed support. So again, the digital equity feeds in with our lack of broadband. And then there's another one on Thursday, same time, at 7 o'clock, navigating COVID and crisis communications.
When was the first one, did you say?
The first one is tomorrow evening at 7.
You can.
And the second one was Thursday evening at 7. And I'd also like to announce, just as a reminder, that the board will be having a special meeting on the 29th to consider action to hire the district's new superintendent. That's the 29th at 7 p.m. That's all I have for President's report. Intermediate report.
I was unable to attend the last meeting because of other local board meeting here that we had, so I was unable to attend. I did reach out to the executive director though to see what was presented, and basically, you know, they're teaching the students that they have remotely, and they're going along with whatever the local districts are doing in their own local district. So like Loyalsock has the full instruction, where like the Jersey Shore students and the other students like in South Williamsport and all the other districts that are doing the enrichment and review. So that's how they're teaching those life skill students also, based on their homeschool district. And, you know, so if anything changes through the state and things like that, then they would change along with it to whatever the homeschool district is doing. That's it.
Just a question, Nancy, did Loyalsock change? They had advertised they were only doing continuing instruction for 7 through 12. Did they change that?
That could be what she said. She said Loyalsock, I think, was like on a continuity plan, but that might have been just for 7 through 12.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Just for clarification, continuity plans is what everyone's doing, whether you're doing enrichment and review, planned instruction, or hybrid. That's part of your continuity plan. Either any of those are part of your continuity plan.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Petrosky. Superintendent's report.
All right, I have three. I have some items here, a couple that aren't on here that I got information from the principals on. The first of all, the bridging the gap phase that you see on our FAQs and that we've talked about before, in regarding to what do we do with the kids when they come back in August, and with the material they didn't get during the fourth marking period, and bridging that to what they need, the essential skills and standards that they need for the that they would normally have coming into the next grade level. I have those plans from the principals. The general aspect of it is that those vertical discussions either have occurred and their plan is outlined for me, or like at the elementary level, that's the next phase that they go into, is this is the vertical discussions. In other words, first grade talking to second grade and so on. But one of the things I would point out, the teachers have done a really nice job thinking outside the box in regard to it's not necessarily that they will. Somebody needs to mute. There you go. It's not necessarily that they're going to get all that material in the first marking period. What a lot of them have done, I know in math, for example, because with everyday math, it's a spiraling curriculum, that some of the stuff they missed in the fourth marking period, they might get some of that during the first marking period, but other aspects of it, maybe they hit later in the second or third marking period, and that's when they would get fill in the gaps there. So it's whenever it tends to hit their part of the curriculum at the next grade level, that the gaps that they have would be filled in at that point. So I have those plans from them so that we can make sure that we're on track for that. In regards to graduation and promotion, I have all of those plans as well. Any of the elementary, basically at the elementary level, the only students that would be retained are students that where those conversations had already started occurring before the COVID-19 leave occurred, so before March 13th. So those families would have been well aware prior to the closure of schools. At the middle school level, they're going to be using the Bulldog Academy to try to help any students that may be struggling as of March 13th. And at the high school level, again, they're primarily using the first marking period is not really impacted for just first marking period or first semester courses. For second semester courses, they're primarily using the third marking period for their grade. And for year-long courses, they're also kind of using the first semester and the third marking period for their final. So the marking period 1, 2, and 3. And then if they're not passing, they're looking at the fourth marking period to see if it was mathematically possible in order to pass, and if so, then then they will pass and get that credit. If it's not mathematically possible, then they'll be reaching out to those students to possibly in the summer doing the credit recovery. And that's what they're going to be doing for any students from the just first semester courses, like we do every year. If there was someone who did not get their credit from the first semester due to not passing, they go into credit recovery. And they would be doing the same thing this summer for credit recovery for the first semester and for a year-long class where it wasn't mathematically possible for them to pass had we had a fourth marking period with them. In regards to graduation itself, Mr. Keene has been talking with some of the surrounding principals as well as some of his staff in regard to some options. Be the general consensus that depending on what the restrictions and the plan that the governor has, depending on what they are, there is a strong desire to try to hold graduation to the date that it is and implement some social distancing aspects in place if possible. But it depends on what those restrictions are. And right now we do know that he goes to May 8th. So what we are going to do is we would like to hear what his plan and the timing of his plan is so that we can make a decision and announce it on the May 11th meeting to see if graduation needs to be delayed, whether we have a virtual graduation on the date it is and a physical one later. There also seems to be the general consensus that we would like to have a physical graduation at some point, even if it's delayed to later in the summer. But due to some of, whether it be kids in the military or kids that go away to college early, we'd like to be able to hold something early as well, like on the date that's given. And so there's a lot of discussion surrounding that right now. And there's about 3 ideas that they have laid out that include options if we can be physically together or not. But which one we go with, we would like to wait and see what the governor's plan is and then announce the graduation plan on May 11th. The final thing is there was a school choice meeting. And I do have an addendum ready, but the addendum, I believe, needs to be altered. I'm going to read you what the committee decided, and then I need to give you an update based on the conversation Mrs. Leedy and I had with Mr. Ishman from PDE. From the committee, the recommendation was that school choice be allowed for elementary school level students for the 2021 school year, and that we would be utilizing the same guidelines as the 1920 school year. And then during that time, that's what the addendum says. However, during that time, we would write basically some guidelines, some standard operating procedures on what this would look like in regarding to class size and everything. But for next year, the recommendation was to kind of keep it as is, let people decide. If special ed students wanted to go back to Avis and Sal, they could, or the families could decide to stay at Jersey Shore if they're already there. After talking with Mr. Ishman from PDE, he is recommending that we stay status quo, but status quo to him was that anyone who is where they're at in the 1920 school year is where they would be allowed to be in the 2021 school year with no other movement. Like if a family is already at Saldaysburg and they should be at Avis, you allow them to stay or go back to their home school, but don't allow any other movement until you get these standard operating procedures worked out. Basically, he called it a transition year, and that he said that could be the safest way to avoid any potential pitfalls is if you just announce that you're going to allow students to be status quo from 1920 to 2021 until these standard operating procedures are developed.
A question. Does that apply to the special education students that we were told they had to move back? In other words, they're going to be status quo also. We don't have to move them back.
But they would be, Harry, they would be anyway under the school choice. They'd get to choose to stay or go back. But school choice basically allows anyone to move anywhere, and there were some concerns from Mark Ishman's point of view to continue that practice without letting anyone choose specifically anywhere, and that we may want to basically allow students to stay where they're at, or if they're not at their home school, allow them to go back on a one-time transfer, and then write the standard operating procedures and put those into place for the 21-22 school year.
So yeah, that was Zeke.
So when we get to miscellaneous, or I'm sorry, old business, or I know it says school choice there, but under miscellaneous or under old business, I'm not sure if you can take a agenda item action under old business. I guess you can. So under old business, we either need to put the addendum as written, or we need to, which could potentially mean, by the way, when it comes, especially when it comes to special ed, that we would have to transport them to whatever school they choose. But we if we go under status quo, then write those SOPs and allow students to stay where they're currently at until these are in place.
I have a follow-up question. If budget-wise, if they remain status quo, does that mean we do not have to hire extra personnel at Avis and Salisbury because the special education students will not be returning to those schools, or they're still going to have their choice? In other words, we're not really sure what's going to happen with those kids yet.
We don't know.
Really budget that staff. How does that work?
We don't know for sure what would happen. However, the likelihood would be that the fewest amount of students would move under this scenario, under remaining status quo, or the way that it's written in the addendum. Simply because students would still be allowed to go back to their home school, special ed, or if a parent who wrote a parent request chose not to write one this year, I would be creating a form for each person to do this, but the likelihood it would require the least amount of staff. I can't say it won't be any staff. First of all, we already had to put into place the special ed teacher and aide. The question is, do we need any regular ed teachers? And looking at the numbers, it would depend on how many chose to go back to their home building. If not too many choose to go back to their home building, we may not need any additional regular ed teachers. If a lot of them choose to go back, then we might.
What if one special ed student goes back? Then we're going to need a special ed teacher?
We already have special ed students in each of those buildings that were identified last year. Those special ed teachers are already in the budget, and there's kids already being serviced in those two buildings as of the second half of last year.
Okay, I didn't know that. All right.
So the additional hires for special ed would only be required if, in fact, it was mandated that they go back to their home school.
Mm. Well, Mr. Kinley, there's already other kids that got identified last year who are being serviced at Avis and Salisbury.
But if there's some of those going to JSC right now, and they were mandated to go back, that may require additional special ed teachers at either Avis or Sal.
It wouldn't require more special ed teachers. It would require, if we mandated them back, it would require more regular ed teachers, because it would put some of those over 30.
Gotcha.
Remember, we have like 6 or 7 singlet classes at Avis and Salisbury. And if those singlet classes, meaning there's only one 4th grade or one 5th grade, if those singlet classes get pushed above 30, then that's where our class size AR comes into place. Or do we need to put an aide with them if they're around 30, or what? That would be a discussion at that point. What this agenda item allows me to do, Mr. Kinley and Harry and the rest, is I can reach out to it. Nothing would change for all the people putting in parent requests. Their status doesn't change other than they need to fill out this form that's going to be created, but they have to give a letter of interest every year. What does change, and what I need to be able to do is if this gets approved, after it's approved, I need to go to those regular ed folks or regular ed family, or I'm sorry, special ed families that are sending their kids to Jersey Shore and basically ask them, do you want to stay at Jersey Shore or do you want to go back to your home building? And after I get those responses, then I'll know if we need any additional staff or do we need an aide for a classroom or something. But like I said, by giving the parents the choice, the likelihood is that will result in the least amount of change.
When is the deadline for that information that you need to know?
Well, I want it all before May 11th. So if this gets approved tonight, then I'm reaching out to all those families and getting responses over the next couple weeks.
Okay.
Just for the setup that they had. So I keep with that. We're not supposed to do anything,
So the biggest thing I will need to know when we get down to old business, Mr. Allen, is whether we leave the addendum item the way it is, and which is not what Mr. Ishman recommended that we go with based on what we're trying to do, or if we change it to basically reflect that we're going to leave kids status quo from 1920 to 2021 and write the SOPs for future years. That's what I'll need to know at that point.
Okay. Just correct me so I'm clear on this. If we say to leave him status quo, the students still have a choice.
Yes, they can either go back to their home building or they can stay where they're currently at.
Okay, I'm fine. I just wanted to clear that up.
It has 1-8. Yeah, it does.
So, just so I make sure I'm answering that, so that I'm being very clear. If someone's going to Avis and they should be going to Sal, they can either stay at Avis or go back to Sal. They can't choose to jump over to Jersey Shore Elementary. They either have to stay where they're currently at or go back to their home building.
Then how are we offering school choice?
Well, that's why this changes to we're remaining status quo from 1920 to 2021 until these standard operating procedures get written. So the kids aren't required to move from where they're currently going or where that family's kids are currently going. We're still not going to separate families. If a kindergarten kid's coming in and they're going to Jersey Shore and should be going to Avis, they can still choose to go to Jersey Shore this year until these standard operating procedures are written. Or they can choose to go back to their home building. Or if they're a special ed student who's been forced to go to Jersey Shore Elementary, they can either stay at Jersey Shore Elementary or they can go back to their home building.
Someone that hasn't moved anywhere can ask to move? Someone that is at JSASD, I'll just use that as an example, and would like to go to Avis, they can do that?
If
their,
I didn't say yes, I said if their home school is Avis, yes. If their home school is not Avis, then they can't switch. They can only switch as if they're switching back to their home school.
How about the parents? We're saying that we want them to have school choice, and we've accepted letters, and now you're saying that we're staying status quo, so we're not accepting letters unless they already were there? I'm totally confused now.
That's what Mr. Ishman is recommending, is that, because he says if you open it up to truly school choice, then no matter where a special ed student chooses to go, you must transport them. We don't have buses that go all over the district from Avis to Sal and Sal to Avis and Jersey Shore to Avis or Jersey Shore to Sal. We don't have all of that. It would require additional transportation because the way it's currently written, except for the special ed students required to come in, that we don't transport students when they choose a different school.
Well, to me, that follows, other than special ed, that falls under keeping the requirements the same as 1920.
Right?
Right, can we get something that's better?
But the difference comes, he says you can have a transitional year. He says that is allowed. That's how they were allowed to bring all the students in, is because the belief or whatever at that time with the superintendents in place was that that the outlying buildings would eventually close and that the kids would be coming to Jersey Shore anyway. However, when those things did not close, now we have to offer it back at these home buildings. So he says if you want to take a transitional year, that would be allowed. But if you truly open it up that they can choose to go anywhere, then you have to, for a special ed student, you have to be willing to transport them anywhere. So if an Avis student chooses Sal and they that's a special ed student, you got to transport them from Avis to Sal or Sal to Avis or Jersey Shore to Avis or Jersey Shore to Sal or whatever. And we're not set up to do that.
So
So
we're
this
not,
is-
we're not following the
would essentially
recommendation
be-
of the committee then at this point.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
So we're not, if we add the status quo thing on there and say transition year, we're not following the recommendation of the committee at this point.
Well, it would be basically a hybrid part of it. It truly wouldn't be school choice. It would be status quo, which would allow the people basically for the kids, they get to stay, the current kids get to stay where they're currently at until the procedures are written out on what school choice will look like.
I'm worried about a kid, I'm getting away from special ed here. I'm worried about a kid that that they're at Avis, and for whatever reason that the parent has, they want to bring them to JSE. Are they still going to be allowed to do that or not?
If they're already at JSE, yes. If they're not, then no.
So what you're saying to me is any new parent that requests to have moved their kid, they can't do it?
That's based on the recommendation from Mr. Ishman if you're going to have a transitional year. You can keep it the way it is. You just have to understand it may require additional transportation costs.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with keeping it the way that the committee recommended. I just need to make you aware, based on what we were told on, I believe it was Friday, that we'll have to provide transportation for those special ed students.
If there are.
If there are any, no matter what building that they choose to go to.
Okay.
So you would have to have two separate bus routes coming out of each elementary school. So you could potentially be creating, 3 or 4 additional routes above and beyond what we have now.
There could definitely be some additional routes.
For JSC, they'd have to be able to choose either Sal or Avis, not just JSE or wherever their home school was.
Correct. If you did school choice, they get to choose any school. You can't discriminate between special ed and regular ed, so you can't tell a regular ed student that you can choose any school, and then tell a special ed student you can only choose JSE or your home school.
But you're also, from what you said to me, you're also denying people, like someone that moves into the district or a kindergarten student, and the parent wants them to go to JSE because we have a lot of them that do that. We have like 50 kids that do that. You're saying any new one, they can't do that. That's where I have my problem.
It depends how you want to open this up. Because again, without those procedures, but that's why I was saying any family, because this is what I asked him. So if I have a family whose 2 kids go to JSE and they have a kindergarten student, he says yes, because that family's still there. You're not looking to separate these siblings. But until these procedures are in place, you can't offer it to some without offering it to all. And when you offer it to all, if that is a special ed student, transportation is a related service. Now, the only way that isn't true is if the parents are willing to sign off saying, I'm willing to transport my own child because I chose a different school other than the home school. But
we do that now, right?
We do that for regular ed, and we can deny transportation for a regular ed student not going to their home building. We cannot deny that to a special ed student.
Right. And that's the truth. I mean, that happens now.
But if we offer truly school choice the way that the committee wanted to do it, then no matter where a special ed student decides to go, we may be on the hook to transport them.
Okay.
And Ken, just a clarification, choice is just for, it's not for every student in the school, it's just for a certain amount of kids. I think it was under 100 kids, 100 students. It's just special ed students and any of their siblings who get the school choice? No?
No, that's what happens.
Anyone can choose.
Anyone? Okay.
But if they don't have an IEP, then we don't transport them because they're choosing a school that's not their home school.
Got it.
It's just the way the laws are written with all that and the way everything works.
Okay, I have a question about that though. Because if we do status quo right now is that we have been allowing school choice, I mean, for like the regular ed students, because we, like you said, already have students that are going from Avis to Sal and they're providing their own transportation. So if it's status quo, I don't understand why it still wouldn't continue that same way.
Well, think about it this way. Status quo, the way he's describing it's basically like a freeze. Everyone stays where you're at. We have to allow them to go back to their home building. That's why there is still an option for them. But a student does not have to move from where, or a family does not have to move from where they're at. That's what status quo is.
Okay.
You're also not allowing families to move where they're at if they want to go somewhere else. And we do that now, but we're not going to allow it unless they already do it. That just blows my mind.
School choice is they can choose to go to whatever school that they want. They're not on a freeze. They could change partway through the year if they wanted to.
Okay, so the situation where we do have 2 or 3 students going from Avis to Saladiesburg, and then they have a new child coming up, are they going to be able to go to Sal with their sibling?
Yes, because they're all part of that same family. We're not going to separate a family. We're allowed to keep the family together, but that family's status quo status is frozen. They have chosen X school, and their children can go to that school or to their home school.
Okay.
So if someone moves into the district, what's their status quo?
They're new.
So are they allowed to go to any school they want?
They would have to go to their home school.
So we're not letting everybody make their choices. Okay.
I've already said this would not be school choice. This would be a hybrid, a transitional year. So it's either the recommendation from the committee, which is truly school choice, that they can choose to go anywhere, or you take the year and write your SOPs. But there's trade-offs in each. Mary, you're identifying the difficulties or the negatives, whatever you want to call them, of going status quo, and the difficulties or if you want to call them, of going to school choice is we could end up needing some transportation routes that we don't currently have, and that will cost us money.
Yeah, you're right.
It's status quo in the sky. All right, I got it.
That's all I have, Mr. Allen.
You had the overview of the 5-year agreement with Lock Haven on the agenda?
Sorry. The overview. I'm sorry. I have my note part done. I forgot about the other thing. It's all right. The overview of the 5-year agreement with Lock Haven University, all that is and the attachments there, that's just the student-teacher agreement that we have with them for them to be able to send participators and student teachers to partner with our teachers. So that the renewal of that is up. So that is there, and that will be on approval at the next board meeting. And then, Mr. Enders, you have the budget presentation.
Yes. So before we get started here, I'll just state that the agenda item, the agenda for the proposed final budget, that agenda item, that budget reflects everything I'm about to say. So what I'm about to say mirrors what's on the agenda for approval. The item that's on the agenda for approval is just the process that the Commonwealth has us go through. The budget will change. There's actually changes I'll talk about some of that have happened since then. But I just want to let you know the agenda item reflects what I'm about to say, and that the sole reason of that is that we have to propose final budget at least 30 days of final approval. And the way our board meetings fall, this is the only way. This meeting was the only meeting we can do that at, where our current calendar sits. So with that being said, I'll go into what is attached to the agenda item. Attachment B, the budget presentation, which is our some standard updated document. Very first thing I'd like you to note is that I have removed the prior indication of utilizing of fund balance. Just due to these current situations, I will recognize that we are going to save some money, but I'm also concerned about the impact. And as of right now, it's too early to what that eventually could be. And I'll get into some more of that in details here in a second. But currently, as the budget sits tonight, deficit is at $918,609. With that, at the end, our unsigned and committed fund balance for PSERS and health insurance and total would be $5,624,781. Unassigned fund balance as a percentage of budget expenditure is 6.66%. And the total unassigned PSERS and health insurance committed fund balance as a percentage of budget expenditures is 12.87%. Before I go any further, any questions concerning that area?
You just went over the budget expenditures, 43.7 million.
Yes.
Basically, how much of that is related to new hirees at either of the outlying schools? Is any of it? There was before. Is any of it still in there?
The two special ed staff are in the budget still for the outlying buildings, plus two special ed aides are each building. So there's a grant for staff members, new staff members.
And I don't know how you're coming through the other people, but you are really cutting out for me.
You're breaking up, yes, big time.
All right.
Okay, let me leave once and see if I can switch my internet. Give me one.
All right. What he was saying is that, Harry, is that there are the two special ed teachers and two special ed aides that are in those budgets that were additions from last year to this year. Last year to this year's budget.
What is the cost of that approximately? Like I think you said like 95 per teacher.
Hold on. I actually have Ben. He's asking. I told him about the 4 people. What was the total cost of the 4?
Well, let me pull up a different document.
And these, with the school choice, you're not really sure whether we're going to need these additional 4 people, or are you sure we're going to need them?
We need those 4 people regardless. We already have special there. Yeah.
That's because we did not close the schools. We have to send these kids back. Is that the reason?
We have to offer, because schools did not close, we have to offer special ed back in their home buildings, yes.
The cost of those 4 people are $250,000 approximately, net salaries and benefits.
250,000 in addition to what we, okay.
So that's 250,000 more than we're spending in 1920, right?
Those are new, yes, those are new positions to the 2021 budget.
Okay, I'm confused. If in fact just suppose there's no movement. You know, the Sal and Avis special ed students stay the same. I thought the additional was going to be required if in fact the JSE special ed students were mandated to move back to those two schools.
No, that's for regular ed. The special ed had to be put into place because partway through the year, there were new students identified, and to put it very bluntly, because schools did not close, the parents wanted them educated in their home school, and when we looked into it, we're required, and I'll let Chris speak to it, we're required to offer it in their home school.
Correct.
So we had to start, after those students were identified as needing special ed services partway through the year, we had to start educating students that did not want to leave their home school. We educated them within their home school because they have the right to have that service there.
And remember that special ed teachers are budgeted at M1s, master's step 1s.
Mr. Enders, so like the true whole cost of the 250,000 that you're saying are for those, there was other movement that could have been in the budget with other retirements and things like that of other areas where teachers might not have been replaced, correct?
All the teachers that have retired, they've been looked at, the positions are needed to be refilled. So all the retirements we have garnered, we have not garnered any position savings through attrition.
Okay. But we
Bottom line, we're adding 200, everything else being equal, we're adding another 250,000 for 2021.
We are adding 4 new positions, 2 teachers and 2 aides.
How about the aides that were already hired that are, full-time that you did hire for Avis? Are they included in the 4? Then you already hired like an aide that works half-time at Avis and then half-time at JSE?
Dr. Daydiana?
Or a teacher?
That was what we did is the half-time, there was a teacher up at the middle school, and they transferred to the half-time position at Avis. However, there's more students identified there now as well, and again, I need to get some answers from after I see what you approve. If anything, I need to see how many more end up going back. But it's basically a swap that halftime becomes full-time, but the full-time that we have to fill, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, is the position that's open at the middle school because the one that Avis left that hole there, and we haven't hired for that yet. We filled it with a long-term sub. Up at Saldaysburg, which is I think the one you're talking about, Nancy, is we hired, because newly identified kids at Sal, that we hired a person that did halftime there and halftime at the middle school. But if more students end up going back to Sal, we're going to need a full-time teacher there, full-time special ed teacher.
Besides the 4, though, that you have in the budget?
No.
This year? No.
The person that's doing the special ed right now is a long-term sub because they weren't in the budget for 1920 because there wasn't special ed there until partway through the year.
Okay. But hopefully, Mr. Enders, we're going to be hiring teachers at step 1 or a lot lower step than the ones that have retired.
Yeah, yes, but the reason he put the special ed teachers, not if we need a regular ed teacher, you're more apt to be a little more apt to be true. You can hire them a little lower, but special ed teachers typically already have a master's. Not always, but typically already have a master's. That's why he put them in as M1s, master's first step, because that's probably much more likely where they're going to come in at because if they're a dual certified teacher, which a lot of them can tend to be, they probably got enough credits to get their master's as well.
Okay, thanks.
Ben, I have to ask a question here. Have you given any consideration to what I asked you at the last meeting as far as what we could have saved or where we would have been now had we closed schools? I'm coming up with almost $2 million we would have been ahead. And that doesn't even include renovations that are going to be coming up on those two outlying schools.
Yeah, Mr. Brungard, I had emailed that to the full board earlier today, so you have that in your email account for you to look at.
Or you did email it?
Yep, earlier today I did.
That is a Friday update?
No, I sent it out earlier today.
When? Today?
Yes, today.
You give me that bottom number. I didn't get it. I didn't have time to look at it. You have approximately what it is. Just curious.
I think it was around 1.2, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
That would be the new, that's including the that would wipe out the 900,000 and bring the savings to 1.2. So it's a little over 2 million.
No, it would go from a $900,000 deficit to like a $150,000 surplus. So it's like 1.2 million swing.
So it had to be more than that, Ben.
Well, the assumption is that the three teachers that were originally presented as being able to be saved are still able to be saved. So that was the three teachers, three custodians, the two special ed teachers we were just talking about, the two special ed aides we were just talking about, the administrative position, the two secretary positions, the two more aides, and then the cost to close and consolidate and the cost to operate the buildings while closed. Plus, there was a reduction for furlough, for unemployment cost.
Okay, I'll take a look at it because I think I remember you saying there's about 850,000 savings. That's 1.7 million over the 2 years projected last year and this upcoming budgeted year. You'd be saving that alone plus the all the other little things. I'll take a look at it and see.
Okay. So, just one other thing about the current deficit, all retirements that the district has garnered in their respective replacements are in the budget, except for the ones that were approved at the last meeting, the April 13th meeting. That will be a change coming down at the first meeting of May. So there was two retirements at the April 13th meeting that I could not get into this budget presentation, but I will be giving another update to the board in May. The other thing I'd like to note on that document is just the cuts that have been made. This is our standard document. It's starting the third page of the document and continues for 4 and 5. You can just go down through those and look at them yourselves. As I said at the last meeting, prior to looking at revenue and local revenue in particular, the budget deficit was down to about 400,000. And then I started looking at local revenue and looking at the pandemic and trying to figure out what it's going to do to us in local revenue. As I said at the last meeting, there was about $500,000 decrease to local revenue, and over half of that is in the earned income tax. Our current budget for earned income tax is $3.8 million. And I believe we probably would have made budget this year. Last year, the very last payment of the year, we got a large chunk of money in, which put us way over budget. Right now, we were trending to make budget for this year at $3.8 million, maybe a little bit over that, depending on if we got another large payment at the end of the year. But we still have not seen what potential decreases in earned income taxes we are going to realize through the pandemic, because even our last revenue that we received was kind of in line with where we were supposed to get for the month. So that would have been, we received at the very early part of April, we received our March revenue. And we were kind of $320,000 approximately, kind of right in line with what we get per month on a regular basis. So I have reduced that number down. The original budget was what was projected, down to 3.7 million. So that'd be a $100,000 decrease over the current year budget, and about $262,000 decrease on what was originally budgeted. Please remember the original budget, as we presented it in January, was set at our 18-19 actual amount received.
I have a question. How often do you receive the earned income tax benefit payment?
I receive it monthly.
Monthly. Have you, since this pandemic was going on, have you noticed any trend? Maybe you did state that, and maybe I missed it. Any trend in it going down, or how much it's decreased, if any?
No. Our payment came in early April, a little later than normal, which is understandable, but it was in line with where we typically receive per month. So our next payment for April should come here first week of May. May's kind of the way May laid out. It might be the early part of the second week of May. But at that point in time, I'll be very interested to see if we're going to see a significant decrease in our earned income taxes.
That'd be interesting, yes.
And I can make sure I put what we get that when we receive it in my board update that week.
Ben, as far as the transportation subsidy, I thought I read in your update today or Friday that $240,000 decrease is not in these numbers.
That is correct. So one of the things I was going to discuss in this presentation was the MOUs and the budget savings that we potentially are going to realize if we pay 85% of our contract. If we do that and it's approved, we will realize approximately $260,000 of reduced expenditures for this current fiscal year. However, please understand that our transportation subsidy for next year is based on the current year expenditures. And I have not adjusted that this year, that if those MOUs are approved, I will have to reduce that subsidy by about $240,000 next year. So essentially, the savings you're going to realize you need to let sit over in your fund balance, and you'll have to use that money to make up the difference for that subsidy subsidy. Your net savings is about $20,000.
Yeah, so we got 260 savings in the current year, but the 240 reduction in reimbursement will be next year.
Yes.
I have a question, Ben.
Sure.
Can't special ed teachers be hired at bachelor's step one? They don't have to have a master's, do they? Or do they?
No, they do. Dr. Dady, I don't believe they have to have their master's. They can be hired at bachelor's, but I'm just telling you, we budget them. We budget special ed teachers at M1s.
That's just and so Patrice, or Mrs. Dobler, what that would mean is if we're able to find someone applies that doesn't have a master's, then yes, you could start them at B1. But like I said, typically people who get special ed sometimes get dual, which means they have quite a few credits, or they got their special ed through a master's program. So that's why, again, kind of trying to hit middle of the road. We may not get them at M1. It might be at an M3 or whatever, but we're shooting for an M1. If we can find them for a B1 and they'd be a great fit, then we'll go for a B1, which would be an additional saving.
Yes.
Again, the budgeting is just a best guess.
Right.
So
Okay.
We also budget their health insurance at a family PPOC plan, which is the highest cost of health insurance that there is.
So again, if they choose something else, or they have insurance through a spouse, or something like that, or they're single, or something like that, which we can't ask any of those questions. Those are illegal questions to ask.
Yes.
But if that's how it turns out, then this costs. Then again, what we budgeted will save some money.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Going back to revenue, conversation I would like to have tonight in regards to state revenue. I will tell you there's a lot of conversation coming out of Harrisburg that we can expect at best flat funding for the 2020-21 school year. As you know, our budget for state revenue and basic ed subsidy, special ed subsidy, and our CTE subsidy has been set at the governor's proposal back in February. If we would choose to go to flatlining the budget, basically essentially setting it at the 1920 projected amounts, we would have to reduce the revenue, the state revenue, by about $267,000. I would tell you my recommendation to the board is to flatline the state revenue.
When you say the projected 1920, so we don't know what that is yet?
So what happened is that the budget is passed by the Commonwealth. We get an allocation. Then they update the allocation in the fall. And sometimes they update the allocation again in May or June. So I would say that the 1920, which is the fall allocation, I believe it was released in August, is pretty set in stone. It might fluctuate a little bit. I'm not expecting huge drastic changes with that.
Okay, I understand. Yep.
And just to dovetail on with Mr. Ender's observations, the conference call that I was in with PSBA last week, there was even discussion apparently at the legislative level to go with a 6-month budget for the first half of next year. So when we get around to the end of June, we may only know what they're going to do for the first half.
I heard the same thing, I will tell you. However, the piece that I heard is that there will be a Commonwealth 6-month budget, but as part of the 6-month budget, the educational line items will be funded for the full 12 years. 12 months. 12, not 12 years, 12 months. So that was some good news, which is slightly different than what Mr. Allen just described.
Well, this was from the legislative director at PSBA. So that's, again, I'm just saying that what Ben is working with is kind of the worst case scenario as far as any year goes. That what we project at the end of our budget of our current year may not look anything like what it ends up looking like in July or August or whenever the state approves it. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Enders.
No, that's fine. Is there anybody that has any questions about me changing the state revenue back to flatlining it? Okay, then. I do want to give you some good news tonight. I will tell you this budget does not reflect any amounts of money coming from the federal government as part of the stimulus package that was passed. I have received a number, but the number I received, PDE is not even releasing it because they don't trust the number. So I'm very cautious about giving that to you publicly. Once we get some more accurate information coming from the state, I'd be more willing to provide that number to you. But I caution you about putting that money into the budget right now because we also don't know the strings that are attached to that money as far as what we are allowed to use it for. That is going to be federal grant money, and I'm not certain that we can use it as a stopgap for this budget. So,
Ben, do you have any idea when that will be announced or when you will know?
what I was told was today so as the Commonwealth is set up is that right now the way they want information to flow is they're working very closely with the IUs, and then the IUs are relaying that information to the districts. I have meetings with the business managers in the IU and the IU business manager twice a week. Today was one of those meetings. He said that, and I'll let you know, he's the one that told me our number. He told all of us to hold steady on that. He was hopeful to get more further information on Wednesday of this week.
Thank you.
You're welcome. One other question I do want to address publicly was concerning the truck in Buildings and Grounds and having some discussion on that. There were some questions on what the truck was used for and if it was a replacement of a truck. So the board remembers we did sell a truck in January. It was a 2000. I don't want to take that back. I don't remember the exact year or make of the truck. It was sold in January because it was no longer to be inspected. The plans with this new truck that's in the budget is we were going to take a 2001 Ford that's currently in the maintenance fleet, move that down and allow that to be used by our crossing guard to transport cones and signs and such on a daily basis, and also provide it to the groundskeeper to transport equipment and fuel on an as-needed basis. The $50,000 that's in the budget for that truck is a placeholder. We only received one quote just to get a dollar amount to put in the budget. At the point in time, if this would remain in the budget, we would, as we start the next school year out, we would receive quotes. We can typically buy vehicles on a state contract, so we can receive multiple quotes on state contract and pick the lowest one, or we could even bid out the project if you want, but there are some costs associated with bidding a project, such as advertising. But that's kind of what the truck will be used for. It will be replacing a 2001 Ford in the maintenance fleet, which is replacing the 2001 Ford is replacing a truck we just sold. Like I said, we just received one quote to put a dollar amount in the budget, but we will receive more quotes when we will go to actually purchase the truck, if it would remain in the budget. Are there any questions or concerns or conversation on that truck being in the budget?
Ben, I have just a quick question regarding the 2001 Ford that we're currently in the maintenance fleet now. How many miles are on that? Do you know by chance?
I'm on it, Ben. I'll find.
Give me 1 second.
And it's in generally good condition?
My understanding is it's in pretty good condition. Trying to find, I had asked Mr. Wall for the information concerning this, and unfortunately right now I cannot
That's
find.
okay. You can me later.
Okay. Can I give that to you? The miles and the condition of the truck.
Absolutely.
I can tell you it's not in mint condition. I can tell you that.
Have we looked into used trucks?
Like I said, we just received one quote just so as to get a dollar amount in the budget. If the board would like us to, when we go to actually purchase it, to buy a used truck, we could look into doing that and getting quotes on that at that point in time. We may even be able to buy a used truck off of the CoStars. I'm not 100% certain on that one, but
Okay. So if we prove this, it doesn't mean that that's what we're going to do. We're not going to go with the $50,000 truck. Just, okay.
That is absolutely correct.
Putting figure out there.
They would still have to approve the purchase of the truck later, correct, Ben?
Yeah, I was going to say the board would do the final approval of the purchase of the vehicle, even if it's in the budget.
Okay.
Not like you approve a $50,000 budget line item and we just go out shopping for $50,000 truck. You would do the ultimate approval of that purchase.
Okay.
I just heard back from Mr. Wall as well. He says he thinks it's a little under. He says he knows it's under 100,000. But he'd have to go check the records for the exact amount, but he thinks it's close. And he says there's no known issues, like there's no big issues in regards to maintenance, body, or passing inspection or anything like that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions regarding the budget?
Well, I see where we have a 0% or zero tax increase, basically. And I think that's very good. I think that we need to provide relief to taxpayers, and especially over the last 5 years, we've raised taxes roughly 85% of the index, and I think this is a year that if we can hold taxes in line without any increase, would be great.
Thank you for bringing that up. I will tell you the budget currently sits at real estate taxes at the rebalance rates. That is approximately $5 for each county for a house assessed at $100,000. That would be what the increase is. The rebalance rate is for Clinton County. Clinton County is the one getting the rebalance rate. The rebalancing process is run by the Commonwealth. It's a part of the calculation of the document it's on the agenda this evening for approval. It's the it's the process by which that does a calculation and looks at the state tax equalization board market value of the two counties and re-evaluates last year's real estate tax rates and what they call rebalances them. It says, okay, this is what the rate should have been for that year. So that is what is sitting on the 2028 rate now. So if you would choose to do something else, going lower, there would be a negative impact on the budget. And if you would choose to go higher, there would be more of a budget revenue there. The one thing I do find interesting, and maybe some of you have heard this, there are some movement in Harrisburg about flatlining real estate taxes. I have looked and I have not heard anything about how that looks for a multi-county school district. Because quite honestly, there is absolutely no way in that calculation to get those two tax rates to be the same number for this year as they were last year. One either has to be zero, the other has to be zero, or the other one, or you go to the rebalance rates.
Yep.
So the rebalance rates to me is the closest thing to flatlining both of them. So
You say
how,
it's a $5 increase per 100,000.
per 100,000, yes.
Yep.
So how they would plan on flatlining for a multi-county school district and having that 2028 come out correctly, I'm not. They would have to change the form for it to do it, or they throw the form out.
And is there a certain time they're going to have to do that by? Like letting school districts know when?
I would hope it would be more sooner than later because we still have to abide by the June 30th date that they don't.
Right.
So I guess the answer to the question is I don't know, but I think they also know that it's potentially becoming more and more.
Do you know roughly how many school districts in the Commonwealth are in multi-counties?
Oh,
There's a lot. I mean, there's probably more than 20.
I think there's probably more than 12.
You know that that's going to be a problem, right? Zero. I mean,
I'm not sure the legislators totally know the ins and outs of some of those problems. But yeah, I will tell you this, the transportation subsidy problem and calculating that for next year is partly because of the wording of the legislation that was passed in Act 13.
well, hope it works out.
So I would say the safest thing for us right now, if they would pass that legislation, would be to leave our rates at a rebalance rate, and it won't have much. It probably will have a slight downtick, negative impact on the budget, but I don't think it would be significant. Significant being more than 100,000.
Okay. Good.
The plan for real estate taxes still remains the same. We will discuss those again. Trying to make a final decision on May the 11th, or final recommendation from the board to me on that on May 11th. And then I would put an agenda item on for May the 25th, you setting the real estate tax increase or where you would like them to be on May 25th. The sole reason that we've been doing that for the past couple of years is because it gives me direction on how to complete the final 2028 plus the final real estate tax rate resolution and do the homestead farmstead calculation for the final approval, which is all still scheduled for the first meeting of June. So please know that we will be discussing real estate tax rates in more depth at the next meeting. And I'll be looking for a recommendation for the May 25th meeting.
When will you actually have actual for the 1920 costs? Do you have them now?
As far as I won't get the actuals till the audit is finally finished in November. We will be looking at some projections on there over the next couple weeks where we potentially stand. As I told Mr. Brungard earlier that the earned income tax is very hard to project right now, just because it'll be interesting to see what happens in May. And even in May, we still have we still have 2 more payments after May to receive that we have to book into the 1920 year. So it's going to be very tough to do a 1920 projection this year.
Alrighty.
I will tell you this, just so you know, you obviously know, we're still paying our employees, and the employee salaries and benefits are about 70% of the budget. So.
Right.
We still have the contingency in the budget for the 1920 for the unsettled contract. So that still has not been spent out. Are there any other questions concerning the budget at this time?
Ben, I would like to commend you on your slides. I think they were very helpful. I think they give us a lot of history and kind of where we're at now. And there's probably never been a year that we're going to have so many unknowns, but it helps to have this kind of information presented this way.
So the typical typical budget presentation that Mr. Kinley is referencing is attached to the board agenda. As I said in my board update, I was not going to go down through that slide by slide, but it's there for the public and everybody else to know, to see. The only slide that is not there, that is typically there at the very end, the very last slide typically gives a projected enrollment, but with us being closed and not being able to enroll new students, I was unable to gather that information at this time. But I will try to provide that once probably summertime hits and we can get back in the office and get back together. I will go through and update that slide and provide it to you separately. Just one other thing to note about the 2028, the proposed final budget this evening for the public to know, because the sole purpose of passing this proposed final budget this evening is to make it available for public inspection. Tomorrow, some point in time, I will be getting in myself into the office. Mr. Allen has it there with him this evening to the page that says that we have opened it up for public inspection. I will scan it and have it placed on our website that people can look at it from there. That will either happen Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on when people can get in the office to work on the website. And then also, which is a little unusual, I will tape it to the front door. So if someone wants to see a hard copy of it, they can drive by and take a gander at it. But that's right now the only way I can make it available to the public. We typically will put it on the bill. This time I'm just going to tape it to the front door. But it will be available for online viewing too, if anybody would like to look at it. Like I said, that's all pending approval. If there are no other questions, I don't have anything else to add. Thank you all for your questions and your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben.
For those of you who haven't seen the 2028, I think it's 25 pages or so. So Ben's going to block off the whole door, apparently.
I wondered.
You may need to have Mark put a canopy over there in case it rains.
Laminate it.
Okay, that's it for the superintendent's report and Ben's report. The question for the solicitor for the school choice phrasing. Do we need to go to executive session to choose which model we're going to follow? Or do we just want to go with a 5 up, 4 down vote to follow one or the other?
Just go vote to follow one or the other. Correct.
Did you hear him, all right?
I think he just suggested we put both of them on the table and whichever one gets 5 votes is one we go with. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So when we get to that item, you have language for both of those, Dr. Dady?
Yeah, I have it down here in front of me.
Okay. We'll just have to somehow just distribute that to the board members, or you can just read it.
Before we vote on that, we will be able to ask questions again, won't we?
There'll be a discussion part, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So move. We have any other executive session for now, Dr. Dady?
No, sir.
Okay. Wow. Sure.
Sorry.
You offended him.
Okay. We'll move to public comment. And again, we'll do this similar to what we've been doing since we switched to virtual, is we'll just have one public comment period rather than having a second one at the end of the meeting. So Pat can open up the phones, or whoever's going to do that this week.
Craig, do you need to remind them the phone number, or it's printed somewhere that they see it?
Yeah, for anybody trying to call in, Ken, could you give them that phone number? You have the direct line?
Sorry, I had to unmute there. For those of you that want to call in, it's 570-398-5576.
Thank you, Mary.
No calls as of yet.
Here comes one.
Jersey Shore School District, courtesy of the floor.
Yes, is this for public comment?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Go ahead.
Yes, it is. Go ahead.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, please state your name and your address, please.
This is Janice Shireman, Region 2, Mount Pleasant Avenue and Jersey Shore. I just wanted to say I'm glad you're getting another truck for Joe Crossing Guard. I see him every day driving what he was, and it really does need replaced, and I'm glad you're going to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sherman.
Pat, are you moving that thing around? Because we're getting a lot of static back.
No, sir.
No, sir.
All right. All right, again, if anyone needs to call in or would like to make a comment for public comment about any of the items or not that are or are not on the agenda, because it's open for both times, the number is 570-398-5576.
Call coming in, please.
Jersey Shore School
Jersey Shore School District, courtesy of the floor.
Hello?
Please state your name and address.
Yes, it's Mark Brady from Jersey Shore.
Caller, if you could state your name and address and go ahead.
Yes, it's Mark Brady, Eden Street in Jersey Shore.
Pat, did we lose him?
Hello?
Pat, you're muted.
We still have a stream.
We didn't hear anything there. If he could repeat what he said.
My name is Mark Brady. I'm calling from Jersey Shore. Hello?
Pat, once you mute, we don't hear anything.
I'm hearing him.
Hello, are you there? Hello, are you there?
Yeah, we can hear him now.
My name is Mark Brady. I'm calling from Jersey Shore. My question is in the PCT now portion that the seniors were taking.
Yes?
How will they receive credits, or will they receive credits, or what is the final process of that going to be?
I can tell you that the plan for that is it looks like we're going to be able to allow them to get their credits, but not until this school year ends. The PC Now courses are not scheduled to be closed until the end of July. Penn College has given that time frame to be flexible with us. So what Mr. Keene is looking at putting into place is using some grant funding that he has to pay teachers to finish the courses that can be completed virtually, to be completed virtually. So as long as the course can be completed virtually and we can get a teacher in place that's qualified to do so, then after June, I believe it's June 2nd, or I believe the start date would be June 8th, and they'd be done before June 30th. They'd be able to finish that, but that would not count towards changing their credit for Jersey Shore. They would still get credit for Jersey Shore, but in the same way that all of the other courses are, based on their work done through March 13th. For the college credit, they would be able to finish that course starting on that June 8th date. But that would purely be to get their college credit, because we cannot do any new instruction while our school year is in place. But we've been informed that once our school year is over, they could be taught that new material, but just for Penn College, and then they would be able to achieve that credit. If he asks anything else, Pat, I can't hear anymore.
Okay, no, he hasn't said anything. Caller, are you still there? I believe we lost.
Did he have a follow-up question, Pat, or not?
No, I believe we lost the caller.
Oh, there's Pat.
So we're still waiting for another caller. I think we lost connection for the other caller.
Again, if anyone has a comment for courtesy of the floor, the number is 570-398-5576.
No more calls appearing to come in.
Okay, we'll give it to, I've got 8:38. We'll give it to 8:40.
Oh,
And then
call coming in right now.
Okay, thank you.
Jersey Shore School District, courtesy of the floor.
Hello? Hello? Anybody there?
Yes, go ahead, caller. State your name and address, and then go ahead and make your comment.
Hello? Am I talking to anyone?
Pat, do you want to talk to him?
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are. You're on the air. You're on the air. If you're watching the live stream, you're going to be delayed, so you might want to turn the live stream down.
Okay. This is Bert Francis, 1425 Locust Street, Jersey Shore. I speak to somebody? I can't hear anybody on the other end.
Yes, we can hear you, Bert.
My name is Bert Francis, 1425 Locust Street, Jersey Shore.
They can hear you, Mr. Francis. They can hear you, Mr. Francis.
A little bit now, yeah. Okay. Are we still communicating?
Yes, you're good to go, Mr. Francis.
Okay, thank you very much. Just quickly, there's some discussion comes up, and Dr. Dady had mentioned it early, and he mentioned feasibility, and he mentioned the capital projects. I understand there's a meeting coming up this Wednesday. Is this correct? I see it in the paper for that meeting coming up on Wednesday for the capital projects.
Yes, there is a capital project on Wednesday.
It's May 4th, isn't it?
I'm sorry, not Wednesday, May 4th, Monday.
We got a bad connection, so let's.
May 4th.
May 4th.
My concern is, will the protocol be the same for the committee meetings for us to be able to attend or see or participate in as we're doing right now?
Yes, Mr. Francis, that meeting will run just like the board meetings are. It'll be streamed the same way, and we'll follow the same procedures that the capital projects meetings normally follow.
Okay, that's at 6:30, and there will be an agenda printed, and we'll know what's going on prior to the start of that meeting then. And one more comment relative to facilities and feasibility, and I think we have to get that on the table and differentiate between those two items. The facilities committee has done a terrific job over the years and taking care of our buildings and maintaining our properties, and I think all the people that work for us have done a tremendous job on maintaining our buildings and keeping care of our properties and protecting our vested interests. So that's one side of the coin. Feasibility deals with an entirely different subject, so I hope we can clarify that, and hope everybody understands and can hear me, that there was some discussion about money being saved on closing the schools and so on and so forth. I just have to say that we got to get back to Nipponose, and anyone that says we save money there, that's not true. There's two sides to the ledger. Yeah, we saved a few bucks, but then we incurred a debt on the other side of almost $6 million. So you don't save any money when you incur debt. So we can't even talk about anything other than school closing or whatever until we know both sides of the ledger. So let's have a nice discussion on that and come up with a reasonable answer. And I think we need to allow our new superintendent to get on board, get his feet wet, sit down and be able to address some of these issues. And I compliment our board. I know you guys have had a tough job doing a lot of hard things and so on and so forth. So I appreciate everything you do. And I think we got the greatest school district in the state of Pennsylvania. So thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
Dr. Beatty?
Yes.
Would someone put that on our website? Because on our website now, it just a capital project committee meeting at 6:30 on Monday, May 4th, to be held at the administration building. So can someone change that so it does say about the live stream on there?
Yep, we can have that changed right away. Joanne will take care of that.
I'll take care of that tomorrow.
All right, thank you, Ben. Pat, when they initially answer, I think it's going to be easier if you talk to them and let them know that they can be heard and get them talking.
I will do that.
Again, if anyone wants to call in for courtesy of the floor, the number is 570-398-5576.
Okay, we'll give them 2 more minutes to go to 8:47. If we don't have any callers, we'll move on.
Pat, for feedback's sake, you may want to remind whoever calls in to turn down their live stream so it doesn't reverberate so much.
Well, and there's also a delay, so they don't think they're being answered. And if I can have the board members turn their volume down just a little bit.
Two or 3 minutes is a long time.
Yes, it is.
It's almost been 2 minutes. We're getting close.
Okay, I have 8:47.
Okay, we're at 8:48. I've had no calls. So unless anybody has an objection, I'll close courtesy of the floor. Okay, move on to personnel. And looks like we have nothing under personnel. Curriculum instruction. Nothing curriculum instruction. Building and grounds. Nothing under building and grounds. Finance items. Can I have a motion to approve the finance items?
I have a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Kinley. Can I have a second?
Sorry, I had my mic muted again. I'll do the second this time.
Thank you, Mary. Any questions, comments, or corrections?
Dr. Beatty,
Yes.
just for the public to hear, for item F, can you talk to us about the grants that we did or did not receive for this, please?
Yes, we applied 2 years in a row for grants to especially cover blind spots and things like that, and for new servers. None of those were realized, and that grant funding went to other districts, and because these were all competitive grants, and a lot of it's based on well, a lot of variables depending on which grant you talk about, but this lease agreement is due to a very aging system for security, and in order to properly address this need, and but the grant funding we've applied for has not come through on this, and it's at the point now where this system needs addressed.
Just for clarification, Dr. Beatty, the grant funding that we did apply for was denied twice, correct?
Yes, 2 years in a row. On this, especially for the next 5 years, because there's money set aside to support the old system that would not be needed, and so, but you're obviously, this is a little more than what you're saving over those 5 years, but I think we figured the break-even point is around 6 to 7 years. With the lease agreement, it might be a hair longer than that, but that's about the break-even.
Any other questions on any of? Yep, go ahead.
Could we single out F to vote separately rather than in one big lump? All the A through F? Okay. Thank you.
The motion and the second still stands for A through F, but we will vote on F separately.
Chris gave you the thumbs up on that one.
Thanks, Chris. I saw you nodding your head. Any other questions?
I just have a question for Dover. Is there a reason you want to vote on that separately? Something that maybe I'm not aware of? Maybe you're voting on that, I would assume, because you're going to vote no. Is there a reason, maybe?
I just think the timing is really bad. I know that we need the upgrade, but the timing is bad. I can't vote yes on that at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Hearing no more questions, we'll have a roll call vote on items A through E.
Mr. Becker.
Yes.
Mr. Berngard.
Yes.
Mrs. Dobler.
Yes.
Mrs. Grant.
Yes.
Mr. Kinley.
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky.
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler.
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. Allen.
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Allen would just like to remind everyone before you vote for F that remember this pricing is only good until the end of April. There's $56,000 savings if we do this before the end of April.
Okay, any last minute questions for item F?
So this is a lease agreement. Do we own them though, the cameras after 5 years?
I think it's a 1-year buyout, correct?
Yeah, there's a $1 buyout, basically.
One buyout, $1, right.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay, we'll move forward with the roll call on item F. Mr. Enders.
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mrs. Dobler,
No.
Mrs. Grant,
Yes.
Mr. Kinley,
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky,
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
8-1.
Okay, moving on to miscellaneous. We have items A through D. We have
So
a motion.
moved, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. We have a second.
Second. Harry.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
I have a question.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Nancy.
I just wanted to ask with the McCormick Law Firm, and so that's just something, because I know that we had, the board, before I was on the board, had come across with this where it doesn't really go out for bid, so they just more or less submit a letter to renew that type of thing, or can any like law firm or solicitor submit a letter to the school district?
Ben, do you want to explain what happened there?
So they annually provide us an engagement letter, what I'll call an engagement letter stating their rates for the upcoming school year. And then we provide that to the board for review. I will tell you these rates are a no increase from the 1920 school year. So that's typically what happens with professional services. The accountant does the same thing, our auditor. They provide an engagement letter, and our the accounting services we just approved did the same thing. They provide us an engagement letter, and we calculate out what the dollar amount is. Professional services do not need bid out.
Okay.
I have a follow-up to that.
Grant,
One
thank you.
is, I'm sorry.
Just recognizing you is all.
Oh, okay. One
All right.
is, do we have to vote on this now? And two, can we put it out for bid?
The answer is yes, you can put it out for bid. Don't necessarily know that you could complete that bid process prior to June 30th at this point in time until you would advertise, create the RFP, advertise the RFP, and then review the RFP.
And I would just, with the previous board makeup, we actually did put out an RFP for a competitive proposal for just our personnel, or primarily our personnel items. And if I'm not correct, Mr. Enders, correct me, but I believe we had 0 bids.
That is correct. That closed in the early part of November, I believe.
Hey, can the board hear me?
Yes.
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 I know we've got several new board members that probably haven't seen what our normal proposal would look like. Just to show at least the depth of our services and our knowledge. So if you'd like, I can put that together. and disseminate that to the board as a whole, just so you can see exactly what expertise we have in this area, the number of attorneys in the firm that we have that can provide the professional services. It's not just myself, although I'm kind of the face that you see more often than not, and then you throw in Jay David in there as well. But we have a number of attorneys who provide a plethora of experience to the district, and so we're not just a one-man shop like sometimes you see in other services. So I'd be glad to provide that if the board's interested, just for some background information on not only myself but the firm as a whole.
Not if it's something that's already available. I mean, I don't want you to take time and have to bill for that or anything like that, but do we have?
Mrs. Petrosky, there wouldn't be any billing for that. I mean, that would just be a courtesy that we would do to the district and for all the new board members.
Okay. Was it something we already do have on file from years before that?
It's probably been quite a while since we've actually submitted a formal proposal like we would for any new solicitorships. So I've done one recently for another school district, so I could just update that for Jersey Shore and provide that to you as a whole, as a courtesy.
Is that all right, Mr. Allen, if he sends that out?
Sure. It's just basically like a bullet point of services and personnel on staff with expertise in school business, correct?
Correct.
That would be
Mr.
something. Yes.
Until we have that, just to educate myself on it, can we please table this until the next meeting, this particular letter?
How's our time frame, Mr. Enders?
Oh, that's fine.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Would those individuals like to change their motion, or would you like to move forward with the motion as is?
Is there a protocol who goes first?
We can go with Mr. Brungard first if you like.
I mean, I'm okay. I just didn't know what the protocol was.
Yeah, it's something we don't do very often. So.
I'm okay to amend the motion to table B until the next meeting. And to amend the motion.
And Mr. Brungard?
You weren't coming through. You're looking for an okay on? I don't care if we table it till the next meeting. If somebody's interested in looking at the letter and seeing what's being done, I have no problem with that.
Okay, so the revised motion would be then to approve items A, C, and D, correct, Mrs. Thomas?
Right.
Mr. Brungard, do you still want to second that?
Yes, I'll second that.
You? Any other questions on A, C, and D? Or A, B, and, or C, yeah, C and D, sorry. These old eyeballs. Hey, hearing none, let's do a roll. A, C, and D.
Mr. Becker.
Yes.
Mr. Brungard.
Yes.
Mrs. Dobler.
Yes.
Mrs. Grant.
Yes.
Mr. Kinley.
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky.
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler.
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. Allen.
Yes.
I know.
Okay, and we'll table item B until the next meeting. Okay, old business, we have the school choice. Dr. Davey, if you'll.
Yep. There's basically two. I have two addendums here. They're both for the same thing, but they're worded differently. The one addendum says school choice for elementary school level students for the 2021 school year, utilizing the same guidelines as the 1920 school year. The other one, Mr. Kenyon wrote while we were sitting here to word it the way that we were discussing earlier. And it says school choice for the elementary school level students for the 2021 school year shall be suspended until further notice. All students that had exercised school choice in the 1920 school year shall be permitted to stay in their current school of choice or return to their home school.
So the item 2 would be the status quo option.
Yes.
And option 1 would be, would probably require increased transportation costs.
It depends on.
That's fairly true.
It depends on what people end up choosing.
Yes.
There's that potential.
But just thinking outside the box with the transportation, we have kids that could possibly be looking at cyber given everything we're going through now. Isn't it possible we could save the transportation costs if we save those students from leaving the district with giving them a choice?
That's
Angie.
I will say, sure, the potential. There's a lot of potentials. That one's even harder for me to calculate. That's almost impossible for me to calculate. I can tell you the potential in regards to how many kids. We've run those numbers because we know who they are. But that doesn't mean that they'll choose that. Where what you're talking about, that could be all 2,200 kids in our school district.
Sure.
Well, no, we only do it for elementary.
It's true, but all 22.
I don't have too many choices in this.
That Mrs. Grant's option applies to all kids. So.
Yeah, but I agree with what Mrs. Grant said, and also, I mean, I think if we have school choice, we could also maybe get some of the students that maybe went to Sugar Valley, like this students, that we could even get some of our students back, you know, from charter schools or cyber and that kind of thing too, you know, because if, you know, you know yourself, like a lot of the reasons why students choose to go to cyber or whatever might have been because of a specific teacher or something that happened within that school that maybe if they had the opportunity to go to a different school, they would want to do that. Also, let me ask you if we would have to transport students, because I know right now we have to transport students clear over to Sugar Valley that we're paying for. I mean, we have to do that because we're required to by law. But with say we had this students that, in your status quo one, this special education students that might want to go from Avis to Saldiesburg where we don't offer the transportation, and we would offer that and we're required to bus them, would we get any reimbursement from the state for adding that bus transportation onto that?
Yeah, sure. We get 70% reimbursement no matter what busing that we have to do, but we still pay the other 30%. The only, I'm not sure I followed everything you were saying, Mrs. Petrosky, but in the status quo one, we wouldn't be busing any students to the other buildings. Everyone would stay as they currently are, which means special ed students coming into Jersey Shore Elementary would still be bused because that is what's exactly happening now. It's just no one would be able to make any other choice. In the school choice one, they can choose to go anywhere. And then again, it's only the special ed students that, those families that we would offer that transportation to as those special ed students.
So right now,
how long have we had the current scenario of school choice? As it the way it's been set up for 1920?
Basically, anyone that wrote a letter.
Well, he's asking how long, and all I can say is it was probably 5 or 6 years, I believe.
Yeah, that would be my guess too.
I believe the first official letter offering that option was sent out by Dr. Chappelle in April or May of 2015.
I agree with you, Craig.
Since we first offered it, have we seen any evidence of charter school movement as far as kids coming back?
The problem is, Wayne, it isn't widely known. Some people get that information. It's not written anywhere.
I don't think we've seen a decrease, if that's what you're asking. I think, Ben, you're gonna have to speak up here a little bit. I think Sugar Valley has somewhat leveled off. It's the cybers that have increased. Am I remembering that right?
I'll pull up that slide out of that budget presentation. So if you look at that presentation, it's kind of in the middle somewhat. There's a nice bar graph that shows the enrollment amounts that went to charters.
It's the next to the last slide, Ben.
Yeah. So you can see Sugar Valley is, I would say, kind of leveling off. And this is based on cost, not enrollment, because there's going to be a increase there. Some of those increases are because of just the natural increase in the tuition rate as it's calculated. But I would agree with Dr. D. It's somewhat leveled off.
But it did not level off between 2015 and current, though. It's only in the last year or two.
Yeah.
And those are the estimated and budgeted numbers, so not necessarily factual.
Yeah, but also looking at this chart, we don't know whether we're dealing with elementary or we're dealing with secondary in those numbers. That's just a total. That's just a total amount.
I agree. We have no student level metrics at all.
And I don't track that data. I don't know if Tori tracks that data, Dr. D at all or not. I track regular ed and special ed just because they drive numbers.
Yeah, I believe Tori keeps track of that. One of her, I don't know if it's an MMS or one of her systems that or one of her Excel documents she tracks it.
I would say that the information that I'm hearing out of Sugar Valley and Keystone is that they did put a hard cap in their agreement, although we wouldn't be able to see anything in that regard until Keystone actually votes on it, which I believe is set for Thursday night. Is that correct?
What do you mean a hard cap? I heard it was they capped the number of students that the charter school will take. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Right now, they're exceeding their advertised cap according to their own policies, I believe.
Right, correct.
But like I said, that's just kind of rumor central. I haven't heard anything or seen anything definitive. But if there is a hard cap, then that would reduce the likelihood of it's not like they can take an unlimited number of students from us.
Right, and us losing more.
Okay, so, and I'll ask the solicitor to rule on what I'm looking for. Is a motion to consider option 1 or option 2 on a majority basis, whereas when we do the roll call, board members would state either option 1 or option 2 as their vote rather than a yes or no.
Correct.
Chris says he agrees.
Just to be clear, 1 was the recommendation from the committee, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That was before we talked to Mark. That's why I needed to bring up what Mr. Ishman said for PDE, because we weren't able to talk to Mark till this past Friday, and the committee meeting was already done by then.
And
Sure,
just to correct.
Oops, sorry.
I'm sorry. And just to correct the process, we probably should have had a motion and second before we even had additional discussion, but if nobody has any objection on the board, I'll kind of waive that process issue.
Chris, all of this is legal to vote on, correct? I just want to make sure, given that Dr. Dady has told us the different special education standards, that this is, everything here is legit, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so before we have any additional discussion, and I'll open it up again afterwards, could I get a motion to consider option 1 or 2 on a majority basis, and the roll call, the individual board members will just state option 1 or option 2 as your vote.
Motion.
And who is that?
Wayne.
Second, Nancy.
So I have an additional question.
Okay.
This year, the current school year, if a family chooses school choice and then chooses to send their Avis student to Jersey Shore or vice versa, the family is completely providing, and they're a non-special education student, the family is providing that transportation in between the schools.
That's correct. That's the way it works now.
Okay. This proposal is saying that the district would pay.
Only for special ed.
We only provide transportation for the special ed families.
IDEA regulations were.
IDEA regulations require that.
Right, and that includes their siblings that may not be special education, correct?
Yes, we have tried not to separate families or discriminate between those family members. So if they have a special ed student, because we do that, we've always, I will tell you this, we have always, a lot of you know we have like life skills and stuff because of the numbers. We're allowed to have those only in one building because of the intensive services. That part's okay. However, we've always, I've been here 20 some years, and because wherever that's offered, we've transported those siblings of those students as well. We've always allowed, if your child has to go to a specific building, your siblings are allowed to come and they're allowed to be transported with them.
Do those parents, I assume those parents have the choice though, right?
Yeah, they don't have to send their kids to the same school if they don't want to.
You know, just throw in a comment here. There seems to be a lot of confusion here with this. I know I'm really confused. I wouldn't mind putting it off to the next meeting and maybe getting something on the pros and cons of this. This status quo was just thrown at us tonight, and I
agree.
I'm confused. I really am. I wouldn't want to vote either way because I'm not really sure.
Mr. Brumgard, I agree with you. I became very confused over the past 40 minutes.
Everybody seems to be asking the repetitive questions, even though Dr. Dady, you've been kind of answering them, but it just seems to be going back and forth, and seems to be a lot of confusion. If I don't know, that's my feelings on it.
I agree, Harry.
I could ask Mr. Kinley and Mrs. Petrosky if they would consider changing the motion to option 1 being the committee recommendation, option 2 being status quo, which is what we're doing now, and option 3 being to table. And then if none of them get 5 votes, table wins.
Well, can I ask though, Dr. Dady, don't you need some type of direction soon about what we're doing with the students?
Sorry, forgot to unmute. I cannot reach out and find out how many students potentially could move, and I'm primarily talking about the special ed students until I get direction. So,
correct.
You guys are really waiting because it could impact it potentially, and it may not at all. Potentially could impact the budget by however many teachers we or aides we may end up needing if enough of them choose to go back, that it bumps one of those singlet classes to a high enough number. So if you table this till May 11th, then you won't know if we need any additional teachers until the second board meeting in May. That's all that it does. It just pushes it back farther.
Would that give you enough time for the budget? I mean, you should to decide which way you want to go, right? As far as hiring or not?
That's a Ben question, whether or not it gives enough time for the budget, because I think that May meeting's when he's planning on you voting on the budget.
No, the budget will be finally approved the first meeting of June. You just need to know that you may get a big surprise at the very end of the process.
Can we?
The other thing that we have too is if you're gonna displace elementary teachers, you're supposed to let them know June the 1st.
Yeah. So as soon as that the crunch time that it does is, all right. The second meeting is the 25th or 6th.
25th is Memorial Day, I think.
So it must be the 26th. You're muted, Ben.
Could we do this? A suggestion. We've had this in the past. Could we have a special meeting maybe next Monday night and put this on just a special meeting to approve or disapprove whatever direction we want to go? Give us a little more time to think about it. I mean, there's not just another thought.
Now we're meeting with the superintendent.
Will that give you enough time to get the information out to us so we can study it a little bit?
We've already advertised that and we can't add anything else to it.
Yeah, it's only one. It's a special meeting. It's only one thing.
Well, I think the way the ad is written, and Chris can correct me on this, is that you can add other things to the agenda. Because it's written, or other things that come before the board, or some wording of that nature.
Not unless you inform the board what it is you're changing.
I don't necessarily think
I don't know that we'll have any additional information that'll be substantial between tonight and Wednesday. That doesn't give Dr. Dady much time to add anything else to the equation.
No.
Here's what I don't know. I don't necessarily think this is the best way to do it, because I'm basically telling folks there may be something that ends up getting put into place that isn't. But the only other option I can think of, so at least we have an idea, is I could reach out to these special ed families now, and at the next meeting let you know how many of them plan on going back to, if they had the choice, how many of them plan on going back to their home building.
And that makes us look like we don't know what we're doing.
Well, let's just see what.
That's the only way.
Looks like we're asking for their input.
Yeah. Let's just, Mr. Brengard, you just want to do what Mr. Allen said and just amend the motion to A, B, or C, A being school choice, B being the status quo, and C being tabling it to the next meeting.
Yeah, that was Mrs. Petrosky, that was you and Mr. Kinley that made the motion.
Oh, it was Mr. Kinley. Sorry, I thought it was Mr. Brengard.
That's all right. I didn't think so. Thank you.
We look a lot alike. I can say.
Sorry. But do you want to consider just amending that motion, Mr. Kinley?
I have no problems. Yeah, amending it to include option 3. I just don't want to put, Ben and Dr. Dady in a bind as far as pressuring time-wise. And
no, but if you amend it for that motion, we can see if we do get 5 votes one way or the other for, option A, and then he gets an answer, or option B, or option C, we'll know if it's tabled.
Yeah, I just hate to, at some point, we have to make a decision.
Right.
We keep going back to Dr. Dady and Mr. Enders for more information, and frankly, there's no perfect equation, I don't think.
And I don't know.
We got to realize we can't satisfy everybody.
Sure.
Even somebody new coming in this year. It's just, I think we're talking about 1 year here until we get, the policy and the SOP in place.
Dr. Dady.
Yeah, Mrs. Grant.
Could you just do me a favor? Could you summarize 1 and summarize 2 with just highlight it, please. I just want to understand.
Okay, with option 1, any elementary child family can choose to go to any school. The upside is it truly is choice. It's school choice. They can choose to go anywhere. We do not provide transportation for regular ed students when they choose to go to a building that's not their home school.
Okay.
However, if they're a special ed child, if they have an IEP, we are required to provide transportation if they so choose. We can ask them in option 1, in the school choice we can ask them, are you willing to provide your own transportation if you go to a different building? But they don't have to say yes. If they say no, they have to sign off on it.
Okay.
And in those cases, when a student with an IEP goes to a different school, we provide transportation for that child and their siblings. You could always change that, but I wouldn't recommend it. If you're going to let that child ride, why wouldn't you let their siblings that are going to the same school ride?
Because we already do that. But to be clear, you're saying if a student does not IEP, then this parent they're responsible for the transportation. It's the convenience of the student that does have with siblings. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I think I misunderstood a comment somebody made so far. Thank you with that.
And then in the second option, the one that people are referring to as status quo, is we're basically saying we need time to figure this out. So wherever you're going this current year, you'll be allowed to stay there, or you can choose to go back to your home building. But that's your only other choice, is to go back to your building of residence. It's not really school choice because you're not choosing to be able to go anywhere you want. It's wherever that family had their children going this year, they can continue having them go next year, or they can choose to go back to their home building. In that scenario, we wouldn't have to add any runs if a IEP student would choose to go to, like, from Avis to Sal or JSE to Sal or Avis, simply because we already have a bus that does that whole loop to bring. We have all buses come into Jersey Shore, basically. We have a bus that does that run too.
But you're saying with step 1 that we wouldn't be providing transportation anyway for non-IEP students, correct?
Yeah, and that's true with option 2 too. For families of non-IEP students, we don't provide transportation for them for parent requests at all. It's only for IEP. In both scenarios, it's just for IEP students. The difference is, under status quo, they're all coming to JSE. And if they went back to their home buildings, they would get on a bus that runs that route anyway. They would ride whatever route does Salisbury or whatever buses do Avis. The issue becomes in option 1, if a Sal student chooses to go to Avis, or an Avis student decides to go to Sal, or a JSA student, whether it be in the Valley or whatever, decides they want to go to Avis or Sal, we don't have buses that do that currently. We would have to create a route.
But the parent would be taking them, not the district.
If it's purely just parent request, yes. But if they have an IEP, we have to transport them if they want.
Yes, I understand the IEP part of it. But if they don't have an IEP and have just requested to go there, then there is no transportation cost. It's on the parent, correct?
That's true of both scenarios, yes. That's true of both.
I just don't see the likelihood of parents wanting to change. I don't know.
I think it's a small number too. I don't see it really happening with that scenario, but it could.
Here's my problem with 2 over 1. Number 2 takes opportunities away from some of our parents. Think about the fact that we are all shut into our house pretty much now. A lot of our parents have lost their jobs. Some of them may not get their jobs back, or they may be taking a different job. And you're telling those people that if I live in Salisbury and I found a job, but I need to take my kid to JSE in order for it to work out for my job, we're going to say no to them under number 2. Because that's not status quo. They weren't there this year. To me, that's where I have a problem. And either they all have the opportunity, or they don't have the opportunity. And number two limits us. Or limits parents. Doesn't limit us, it limits parents that already exist in our district.
That's true, Mary. That's one of the reasons Mark said you could take a year to do that, because they do allow those transitional years, but it couldn't be something indefinite. These SOPs would have to be in place so that the next year everyone is being able to follow the same procedure.
I mean, Dr. Dady, I know that you'd said in the past that, it's not just what we do, but it's how we do it that conveys a message to our students and to, the parents and to the community. And yes, Mrs. Thomas, I totally agree with you on number two, but at the same time, I think number two protects us in the aspect that we have to make sure that whatever or however we set it up, if we continue to go with choice, that it's going to provide equity for all. And we have to make sure that we can afford it and that we are able to do it and the administrators are able to deal with all of that. I don't know what that looks like on their end, but my thoughts seriously looking into the future, here's just a scenario I could stick out there, a possible one. If a child wants to go to a different school, let's say they're in Saudisburg and they want to go to Avis. So we just let them go. But next year, Avis has a renovation. Mom and dad don't like the fact that their child's being disrupted. So now they want to move them somewhere else. And from year to year, they're starting to bounce kids around. And I just see there being potential issues. So for this short amount of time that we have in trying to get any kind of practical procedures into place, that it protects us and it helps them. Option two seems to be, I believe, the way to go until we have it exactly how we want it and we have enough time to make it.
Unless you're the parent that it harms. I agree with you. Unless you're the parent that it harms.
That's the side, but that's the thing that, even what Mr. Kinley said, we can't be everything to all people. We can do our best to try to help in scenarios. It's not a one fit all for every family. That's why if they, that's what we're trying to make better for them next time around, next year.
You offer school choice or you don't offer school choice. You can't have all these. If you're offering a school choice, you can't have all these exceptions. You're either offering a school choice or you're not. If I was a parent, I'd be suing this district. If I was one that was the one that was put out and couldn't do it, and you let all these other people do it because they've already done it. And this is the year that we had the virus, not last year or 2 years ago or whatever. We don't know what the parents' needs are going to be.
Mr. Kenyon, do you think we have exposure?
Unfortunately, when you're dealing with FAPE and IDEA, you always have exposure. There is a potential, depending on what decision you make, either way. And that's just the honest truth. The way those regulations are is it doesn't matter what student population you infringe on. If there's a perceived infringement, that family has the right to file a complaint.
Okay, we've heard from, I think, everybody on the board, with the possible exception of Mrs. Dobler and Mr. Becker. I just want to make sure that we give those two a chance to give their opinion if they choose to. Mr. Becker.
I did ask about the transportation.
Okay.
Earlier, but at what point do we start writing the SOP and making this so that it's a proper policy that is enforced? I mean, or how do we go about doing that? Like, what's the timeline for that going forward?
Well, the timeline would be if you want it in place for the 21-22 school year. If you're going to set this in place for 2021, then you would want these SOPs done for 21-22. So that's how we would have to map that out. So if you choose one thing and the SOPs change what is allowed, then there'd be kids forced to go, potentially forced to go to a different school the following year or forced back. The only way to avoid FAPE in all of this is an option that I don't think we want to go down, but because that option is force everyone to go to their home schools, period. And that is the only way to avoid any exposure to FAPE.
Can they use past experience in something like that, Chris?
No, each year is going to be looked at individualized on who is not being provided a same educational opportunities as the rest of the student population.
Okay. Thanks.
And I think that's why Mr. Ishman through PDE advises, at least if you have that transitional period, you've at least cut off a segment of potential violations, and you give yourself the opportunity to limit that exposure and then move into a transitional period when you've developed a succinct plan and an SOP for moving forward without just stopping from one year to the next year. We stopped it all this year, nobody gets school choice, but then next year you give school choice. You potentially have disenfranchised certain student part of your student population.
Plus, frankly, that just wouldn't be good for kids if we're going to say no school choice. No, everyone goes back to your home building this year, and then we end up writing an SOP that allows them to go back because they're jumping between schools, and that's kind of what we're trying to avoid here until we get something in place.
Well, I thought we didn't start talking about writing a committee until decide whether scenarios, and we said, well, we're really talking about things that we don't know whether that's the direction we have to go or not. We need to find out if this board wants to support school choice or not.
Right, because we were talking about like fine tuning, what the class size limit would be and things like that. There's other kinds of things that need to be discussed.
So one final point, like if a class at any given school already is at or above what we think is the limit, we still allow a student to transfer over to that class through school choice. So if you have like right now you have a huge 5th grade class, 28 kids or something at Salatiesburg. If someone from Avis says, "Hey, I want to go over to Salatiesburg too," even though there's 28, do we allow we school choice says that's fine, we'll put 29 in that?
No, there'll be limitations. That's part of what you would. That's part of your guidelines that you would create.
But I mean for next year.
You can max the class size out. But we weren't going to go that direction, or they weren't going to go that direction until we made a decision whether school choice was going to be a choice or not. If the school choice is not a choice, you don't need those maximum class sizes and that stuff because it's whatever lives in your defined geographical area. If school choice is a choice, then you have to make those decisions. But we decided we were crazy just talking about things that we didn't know whether we even needed to talk about.
I think what you would do, Dave, is you could say in here, as long as it doesn't push the, I'm not sure how we would word it, but basically the places we're worried about it could potentially impacting is our singlet classes, and some of them are low enough that they probably wouldn't be impacted, but some of them are high enough that they could be impacted, depending on how many chose to go that direction. Would it ever get high enough that we would have to hire a 3rd teacher at those buildings? Well, first of all, I don't know how we would set that limit in this agenda item to say that it wouldn't be able to go above whatever 60 kids.
I thought, Ken, when we talked at the meeting, we talked about that this was the first thing that had to happen. If school choice was then an offer, then you could start, you were going to take the 2 weeks and find out where these kids were going to go that are presently in special ed. And then from there, you were going to look at where you're at and whether you had to develop those kind of limitations. But that's the way I understood it.
No, you're absolutely right. But again, I need to know which one of these that we are doing. And but what people are talking about right now is something that gets done next year for the 21-22 school year, which is, do we set caps? Do we What do those caps look like, and so on and so forth. And I think
they can't be set now because why?
What?
They can't be set for 2021 because why?
Well, you can. You're the board. You can.
No, you're saying that we would do this and we would set them for the 21-20. My understanding from our meeting is that if we chose school choice, let's just say we chose that one, you were going to check with all the special ed students to see who would want to probably go back. Then you were going to look at numbers and then to see, do we have a problem? Do we have to set maximums, or do we have to set maximum? That's the way I understood it. But I guess that's not what we were looking at if you're talking about a year from now.
Well,
I thought we talked about that we'd set things and you might have to fine tune, and that's what you do with any policy that you have. But
I think what Dr. Dady's saying is he heard a different scenario from PDE.
He just said it would. Yeah, he said that you would see, but by doing status quo, we totally we do not then have school choice. Don't say we have school choice if we're going status quo and there's going to be parents that you're going to say no to.
I don't think anyone's saying. I think I've been very clear that that's not school choice. It's a transitional year till basically the board decides, what does this look like moving forward?
Well, we look at just remember. I don't know. Remember the ones that we've gotten to that we had to approve in the years past. Some of them are very lax as the reasons as to why they're going or not. Now you might come up with someone that has a true legitimate need, and we're going to say no to them because you didn't do it last year. I'll just keep quiet now and vote.
Let's move to Mrs. Dobler, see if she has any input.
No, I really don't at this time. I think I know which way I'm going to vote.
Mr. Allen, can I ask?
Just absorbing all of it.
Question.
Yes, Ms. Stemler.
Ask the solicitor a question.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Kenyon, can you hear me?
Yes.
So did I hear you allude to the fact that in choice number 2, staying status quo, it would somewhat legally protect us in what we're doing to transition on whether or not we decide school choice next year or we don't, but it would protect us legally if there were any kind of complaints, headache, if we choose.
Yeah, the thought process is so what you would do in a transition year is you would stay at everything for a year, which would then limit your exposure to just that individualized group that had school choice in that year. You'd roll out your new regulations, which then would take an effect. So in a sense, you're not changing school choice, you're changing the rules relative to school choice. That's what's going to be the potential violation. And that's what PDE's guidance is that by changing how you're rolling out school choice, you're creating a potential FAPE or IDA violation. And so by giving yourself a transitional year, you're limiting your exposure during that time period.
Okay, well, that definitely clears it up for me, and I appreciate that. Thank you for explaining that.
But if we offer school choice, the option 1 to everybody, including students with an IEP, how does that open us up for any kind of FAPE problem?
That's your IDA problem, I think.
If you can ask, just say that again, Mrs.
Okay, what I'm saying with option number 1, where we would give school choice to everybody across the board, including students with an IEP, where would there be a problem with FAPE or getting us into any kind of trouble?
I think the problem, it's not the blanket rolling it out. If you blanketly roll it out to everybody and nobody has, and everybody has free choice and you can do whatever you want, you're probably not going to run into a FAPE issue. But if you're doing school choice in which you're going to have a SOP at some point in time, which I think that's always been the discussion is what does this look like and what are the parameters on which you're going to allow it, that's the portion of it that's going to potentially create the FAPE or IDEA violation.
And what is SOP? Because I don't even know what you're talking about.
Standard operating procedure. Basically, how do you consistently do this thing?
But Chris, you would legally guide us through that, correct?
Not only would we have them look at it. My conversation with Peg, Mrs. Leedy, is that we would want Mark Ishman to look at it.
Yeah, generally between myself, Mrs. Leedy, and Mr. Ishman through PDE, we'd all be reviewing it. And again, we could roll it out and nobody could file a complaint. It just depends on if there's a particular family or student who feels that their rights have been infringed upon. And we have no idea who that is going to be. You can't always identify who those individuals are.
I mean, ultimately, we need to develop something that's got the most defensible position.
Correct. And again, a defense doesn't mean that you're successful. I mean, there's always an infringement that occurs, and in the exposure that is most problematic most times is the fact that attorney's fees are recoverable, and there's generally some level of compensatory education. And then who ends up we violate their rights, we just never know until forward most times.
How long would it take to put together the policy that we need? Say we wanted to open school choice and we need to protect ourselves, and how long would it be to put the cap on and figure all that out? Couldn't we do that right away so that we could go ahead and have school choice, or not feasible?
It depends how soon. I don't know how many teachers we need.
We've been beating this around for probably 2 or 3 months now. I think our the 13th of March.
I just believe there's so much uncertainty with funding, and I think this next year there's going to be so many things that we don't even realize it's going to pop up. I just can't see opening up school choice. And your example a little while ago, if you had 28 students in a class and you want to cap it at 30 and three want to move over, now what do we do? I mean, are we prepared to incur those extra costs to split classes so that we stay under the cap?
I mean, from a liability standpoint, Mr. Kinley, those are the types of things that you'd be looking at. If we're offering school choice, that's the exact scenario where there could be a FAPE violation, is where they're going to say, you've allowed this for these particular students. Now, because the class size is too great, and my number is going to push that class, and you're going to tell me, no, I can't, because you have to bring in a new teacher, a new aide, or whatever that justification is, that would be the violation in that potential scenario.
I just don't think that we're going to have many, if any, students adversely affected, and with a $900-some thousand deficit, I just think that waiting another year to put something in place is.
Well, Wayne, here's something you're forgetting. If all the kids that are in special ed now decide to go back to their home school, that situation can be created. And status quo's down, and we're saying they're allowed to make that choice. That situation can still be created under status quo.
Correct.
My question, Chris, I'm asking you a question legally. I'm asking a legal question here.
I think what Mary's point is if we said no more school choice, everybody goes back to their buildings, you will definitely have an IDEA and fake violation for all those special education students.
No, but we're giving them a choice whether they go back or not. And if they choose to go back, then we could run into the same situation. My legal question is, for the last 2 years, as far as I know, and I'm just saying, for as far as I know, any parent that has written a letter and asked to have their student moved to another school, we've said yes. So now, as status quo, we're going to say no. Is that correct? We're allowed to say no to them? When in the last 2 years, everyone we've said yes to, we've never said no. How does that affect us?
Well, remember, status quo isn't that you're doing the same thing. It's that you're putting a basically a freeze to what you're doing in order to
call it freeze. And it's not status quo.
You're not undoing anything that currently exists.
It's status quo for the current students that are in it.
Correct.
Yes.
And that's why I drafted the resolution the way that I did. It's not to call it status quo but to identify exactly what you're doing. You wouldn't allow any new school choice, but the ones who have already engaged in school choice would be allowed to stay where they're at, which is what the idea of status quo is.
Okay.
Right, and they still have a choice, Mr. Kinley, to those IEP students still have the choice, even under that option 2, to go back to their home school.
Correct. That's the way I read it.
If they do, yes.
Take a vote.
Yeah, take a vote.
Okay. The motion on the table right now is either 1 or 2. We didn't have a change in that motion between Mrs. Petrosky and Mr. Kinley. Question to the solicitor. If we kept it as it is, does this require 5 votes or just a majority? Majority of votes cast.
Majority.
Sorry, go ahead.
5 votes be a majority, aren't we all here?
Mrs. Thomas, I was asking a question to the solicitor.
You need 5 votes.
Okay, so if somebody abstained, we could go 4-4 and it would not pass.
Correct.
Okay.
So Craig, what happens here then?
Then
okay, just asking that.
Is there an idea that somebody would
to dinner?
Is there a thought process that somebody would abstain, and for what reason?
I'm just saying that if it would occur.
Okay.
We had one attention trying to get ahead of it. And that would give Dr. Dady 1 additional full week to at least try to develop some better numbers for us. But the only thing I would ask is next Monday, if we're going to have a special meeting, we've got to make a decision A or B. We can't continue to bat this around and delay it any.
Be able to. I would ask for that reason.
Chris is saying that if anyone abstains, they'd have to state their reason because he's not sure that they could.
I don't know what the potential financial interest would be for somebody in a household, so that would be.
All right.
Can I ask one last question before we vote?
Sure.
Is there any way to tell how much, if we would say this policy like option 2 was applied this year, how much more or less it would cost us if we had already done it? Is there any way to tell that?
No, I wouldn't think so.
I'm not sure I understand the question, Dave.
Right, like, there's obviously no way to tell what's going to happen going forward. Right, like which kids are going to choose to change schools, which special ed kids are going to choose to go where, but knowing that if we would have, is there any way to tell how much it would have cost if we had it in 2019, 2020, or the changes that happened this year, how much did they cost us in terms of budget or money?
I'm not sure that we'd be able to calculate how other people would have decided things. What I did, the only thing I felt I could do that would have any sort of financial integrity is what I presented, to where if all special ed students were to go back, here's what we would need. If there was no school choice, here's what we would need. And that was a difference of, I think if everyone was forced to go back, if there was no school choice and there was no like work under last year's scenario, if everyone was just purely forced to go back to their home schools, we needed 4 teachers. Or we needed a combination of some teachers. And if you were going to have a teacher have 31 or 32 kids with an aide, then you'd have had to make a decision regarding that. If it was big enough to separate into 2 classes, then you would need 4 teachers.
Okay, thank you.
It was actually more teachers just doing just the special ed, which I don't think legally you could have done. I think if you gave school choice, you'd have to give it to them as well. But even if you could do that, it was actually more teachers, because I couldn't shift. It wasn't enough kids that I could shift any teachers.
Yeah, I'm on again. Did you guys vote?
No, we're waiting for you.
Okay. I'm good. No more questions.
About 5 minutes ago, it just went out again for about 4 minutes. I don't know whether you voted.
No,
I'm calling you over phone company
I
tomorrow
think we are now.
If we had, we could have got that 4-4.
4-4. I decided. That's great. I get the presidential vote.
Frank, are we doing A and B or 1 and 2?
Right now, the motion is A and B.
Okay, so A is school choice?
A is full school choice as recommended by the committee, and B is continue doing what we're doing, essentially.
Yeah.
Status quo.
We understand the difference.
Nope. No. Okay, let's vote.
Okay, so will Mrs. Petrosky and Mr. Kinley amend their motion to go with 2, or prefer to have a third option?
I'm not going to change my motion.
Okay. All right, so it's down to 1 or 2.
All right, Craig, now you just changed from A to B to 1 and 2. What are we doing?
Well, A and B.
Okay.
I know it said 1 and 2, but A and B is correct. Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Okay, so A is the committee's recommendation. B is continue what we're doing.
That's status quo. B is status quo.
Yep. Right.
But it's not really continuing what we're doing, but we want
Exactly
to
status quo with the twist. We're not talking that way.
It's as close as we're going to get to what we're doing.
It's basically freezing what we've done. It's
Because
freezing.
it's always what comes in the door is going to always change it, depending on the students' and parents' requests.
All right.
Okay. Mr. Enders,
Yes, I'm still here.
are you prepared to
Mr. Becker.
This is a really tough vote, but I'm going to go option B.
Mr. Burgard.
Yeah, I agree. It's really tough. I'm going to go status quo, option B. That's what status quo is.
Mrs. Goldberg.
I like option A.
Mrs. Grant.
A.
Mr. Kinley.
B.
Mrs. Petrosky.
A.
Mrs. Stemler.
B.
Mrs. Thomas.
A.
Mr. Allen.
Oh my.
Here's where your abstention is.
You guys just.
I got that vote, Craig.
I'm going to go with B.
So
Option A, 4 votes. Option B had 5 votes. Option B. Status quo.
No, this was all public, so all parents know how we discussed this, so it'll
Thank
be
you, Mary.
interesting.
Okay. That is the last of our agenda, other than, do we need an executive session, Dr. Dady?
I don't have anything. Ben, do we have anything that you're aware of?
I do not.
Craig, do we have to talk about Wednesday or not?
Tonight?
Yeah.
What would,
I guess I just thought we were gonna have an executive session to make sure everybody was okay with where we're at. If we don't need it, that's fine.
I just got the final revisions back from Jay David this morning. So I'm thinking we probably should have an executive session before our vote on Wednesday, if that's okay with everybody else.
It's a good idea.
6:30, 6:15, what do you think?
Let's plan on 6:30 unless anybody has any objections.
What time did you say, 6:30?
Yeah.
6:30 for executive session, 7 o'clock for the meeting.
Correct, Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Just for your informational purposes, in case Jay David has not passed this along, he will be attending that board meeting since he was part of the negotiating, or the negotiating team for the contract.
Okay.
So I'll make sure that he knows 6:30 executive session for everybody.
Very good.
I'll send out a calendar invite tomorrow, or it'll be an updated one.
Thank you, Mr. Enders. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Do we not have public comment again or not?
No, we merged them.
Oh,
We've been merging them ever since the first virtual meeting that we had.
We should probably remove it from the agenda then.
Well, it's a standard agenda that we use.
Okay.
And we can change that. So when we go back to the
live meetings,
the normal way,
Which I'm predicting we get to do in June.
Maybe.
I hope so.
Okay. I have a motion to adjourn.
Motion, Angela.
Thank you, Angela.
Second.
You don't need
Second.
Thanks. Good. We're done. We're out of here.
Have a good night, everyone.
That's my gavel beating on the
Hey, Ben. Oh, you're leaving. Never mind.
Thank
You
you,
know,
everybody.
when we first started, Craig, when we first started doing our virtual things, and you know, when Ben does the roll call, he says 9-0.
Yes.
Well, the first night when he was doing it, I thought, I was hearing don't know. I thought, what the hell doesn't he know? That's the way it took me a while to hone in. What is he saying?
Are we all fine?
Business manager that he is calls it an O instead of a 0. If he just said 9-0, I'd have picked up on it right away. But my hearing aid was like, don't know. What doesn't he know?
Have we quit streaming?
Hold on.
Good night.